Welcome back to the Caregivers Journal podcast. I'm your co-host, Lance A. Slatton, along with my esteemed colleague, Christina Hardin-Weiss. I'll ask you if it's the better half or the lesser half of Cindy and Christina Hardin-Weiss, but we'll leave that up to you.
I was going to say, I won't apologize to the audience because I think it would be better if Cindy were here. She's definitely the better half of the duo. So
Well,
I apologize ahead of time.
Yes, well, Cindy's not with us today. She's under the weather. We hope she feels better quickly. And we have a special guest today, a family caregiver, a multifaceted family caregiver, Elizabeth Miller. Welcome, Elizabeth.
Thanks for having me.
Our pleasure, our pleasure. Well, I'm going to start us off, Elizabeth, with viewers and listeners who may not be familiar with you and who you are. Why don't you share a little bit of your background and what you're doing and who you are?
Yeah, I'm Elizabeth Miller. I live outside of Atlanta, Georgia. I am a former sandwich generation caregiver, so cared for both of my folks who are sadly no longer with us, and also was a support caregiver for my husband's mom nearby. So we were simultaneously squeezed and working caregivers at that. So really felt the pressures of that. And now I'm, caregiving comes in different seasons. And my season now is I'm a sibling support caregiver for my older brother, Tom, who was born with an intellectual disability and is on the autism spectrum.
Elizabeth, a lot of times when you're in a caregiving journey and, like with your situation, you've taken a lot of journeys, different roads, different circumstances. We face struggles, we face, wins, we face losses. What were some of the biggest challenges you faced or are facing in your current or past caregiving role?
Yeah, it's a good point because they do change, I think. Like at the time, 10 years ago when we called it our spiral year, when things were just kind of spiraling out of control. That's why we called it the spiral year. My husband and I were losing our minds, frankly, with the sheer volume of the things that were on our plate and the learning curve of everything that is entailed in being a family caregiver. That we felt really overwhelmed. We felt isolated in that journey, that there wasn't a whole lot of people around us that we could, tap into for advice. And it was emotional. It was physically exhausting. It was all of the things. And, experiencing burnout and trying to figure out trying to not feel guilty about not working. So it's just the cornucopia of emotions there. And the newness of it, I think, was so overwhelming. And then, fast forwarding to now with my brother, he got backburnered a little bit while we were taking care of our parents. It was like, okay, you're okay, you're alive, so just hang on tight over there and just keep doing what you're doing. And we would intervene when there was a crisis situation. And then when my folks are now both deceased, my dad passed in 2014, my mom in 2020. And then it was, the siblings that we were like, okay, we've got to lean in and really even take more responsibility for Tom. And it's a different diagnosis, right? It's not an older adult. It's a person who's been living with a disability his entire life. We're siblings, so he doesn't necessarily want to hear from us and take advice from us. And it's complicated, like the navigation of it. I'm learning every day about how we do that. And then we have another kind of nuance to our situation right now where I guess I'm a snowbird caregiver, frankly, because he lives half the year in Michigan with my sister currently, and then half the year in Georgia with my brother.
There's worse places, Elizabeth.
I know. We love Michigan and we love it. And it was my parents, former place. And I know that's where you're home, and it's kind of a second home for me. My mom was from Michigan. But it complicates things when we have, a person with not only these intellectual disabilities and developmental disabilities, but also some physical things going on. And then where do we tap into the different services and things that are available to them? So we are like in the thick of that right now with the goal of having Tom live full time in Georgia because we have more resources, we have more family. And my sister, is not sure she's going to stay in Michigan. So we need a long-term care plan for him.
Right. Just real quick before I go to the next question, people that may know you as the Happy Healthy Caregiver, which I've told you this when we've talked before. I think it's the best name ever. But
thank you.
You're welcome. But what would Elizabeth Muller be had she not embarked on all these caregiving journeys with the parents and the in-laws and your brother? Like, what was your goal when you were in college or high school? What were you thinking you were going to be? Definitely not a caregiver.
Yeah, I mean, I studied broadcast journalism at Penn State. So, it's interesting that I'm a podcaster now, like that kind of coming back to that and enjoying spotlighting and telling other people's stories. But what I found when I started working in that industry was that I didn't want to work midnight to 6 in a rural part of the state and make next to nothing. And so quickly kind of learned that this wasn't what I wanted to do full time, is be a broadcast journalist. And so I fell into IT, frankly, information technology, and I did had a great career doing that, and was on a trajectory to probably be a VP of something at some point. When I left my corporate career, I was a director managing multiple business transformation projects. So I've always been kind of a person who can take complicated things and whittle them down into things that make sense to other people so that they can take action on them, and solution oriented, right? Developing different technology solutions to help people with their everyday stuff. So probably would have kept doing that, frankly, because it afforded my husband and I, he works in the beverage industry and has his own classic cocktail right now, a canned drink called Good Days. We've always kind of been entrepreneurial and trying different things and supporting each other. So maybe I would have tried some other entrepreneurial thing. Travel is something that I was definitely like, could I be a travel journalist or write travel guides? Like that would be probably a dream job there. Yeah.
All right. When I first was talking, there's ups and downs of caregiving, no matter if you're a professional or if you're a family caregiver, whatever journey you've embarked on. There's the downsides to it. And downsides doesn't mean not in a negative connotation, but, the days where you're feeling lonely, maybe depressed, you're eating junk food, you're not getting to exercise and socialize. But there's a lot of rewarding moments. And I think often that the people doing what we do, like yourself and Cindy and Christina and the countless others, we wouldn't be doing it if it was such doom and gloom, right? We're there to help support these caregivers and, lift them up. What were some of your most rewarding moments that you experienced in any of your caregiving journeys?
Yeah, I appreciate you saying all that, Lance, because there was a clear mindset shift that had to happen to me early on. Like I started blogging about caregiving, and I have always been a glass half full kind of person. Seeing the sunny side of things, and I wasn't kind of recognizing who I was. Thought like this is negative and icky, and intentionally trying to figure out how to reframe that and get away from that took a lot of intention and a lot of practice. And frankly, like the things that I was doing with Happy Healthy Caregiver, they were as much for other people as they were for me. Like I needed the accountability to be able to keep trying on different things so that I could feel like myself again through this whole process. But the rewarding things, I think once you start looking for them, they're there. I had a lot of bonus time with my mom in particular that, had she been healthy, I would have probably kind of, immersed myself in my immediate family and maybe, seen her occasionally, but had a lot of really cool conversations with my mom. Some of them I was able to record even and have them on the podcast. And, at first I thought she wasn't going to like the things that I was saying about caregiving, but she was always really supportive. She was a writer. And, we were both avid readers. We loved to play games. We loved to, eat new foods and try new things. And so we really were kind of, finding those commonalities together of the things that we could do to bring us joy. And I'm on the same journey now with my brother where, I don't want it to be all work. And so finding those things that we can do together that is a little trickier. We don't necessarily have a lot of the same common interests, but he's got a passion for smoked food like no other person I know. And so I'm getting to know a lot of the smoked restaurants in Georgia and where they have the best chicken wings.
All right. So, retrospect and looking back, you'd say hindsight's 2020. For you, it sounds like you started as a caregiver for your dad, then your mom. Or was
Both
it
of them. They've both been battling chronic things my entire adult life. And so it started, hospitalization here or there. And then they both were spiraling at the same time in 2014. But actually my dad was the stronger of the two. And I think we see that a lot in older couples where, if I was a betting woman, I would have said my dad was going to outlive my mom. He was going to thrive. And that's not what happened. He was a caregiver for both my mom and my brother, and that stress, along with his own health things, put him on a rapid path to passing away much sooner than we thought. And then, my mom having 6 bonus years, and I credit a lot of that to, I was her primary caregiver for a while, but my sister in Michigan was my mom's primary caregiver for the last 4 years of her life, and that one-on-one attention kept her around.
That's wonderful. And how fortunate you were to have family support, because we all know that's not often the case. It's usually all on one, but when you look back at those experiences, Elizabeth, if you could go back and talk to yourself all those years ago, what would be the one thing you wish you knew at that time that you didn't discover until afterwards?
There's a lot. I think the biggest thing I think was just, I didn't even call myself a caregiver. Like, my business is called Happy Healthy Caregiver, but the first version of my business was called Savvy Sandwicher. So I connected with the sandwich generation, but I get frustrated that it's still really hard for people to identify with that role. And I kind of place a little bit of onus a lot of onus, frankly, on our healthcare system. Like they're in the front lines of seeing these family members and these people. And so just the simple thing of like, wow, this must be a lot for you. You are, juggling a lot of competing priorities. Did you know that there is caregiver support out there? And tapping into, podcasts such as this and the things that could help them. So didn't know that for a while. And once I learned that, I this whole world kind of opened up. It was like this lighted tunnel type of thing. So that would be, definitely one thing. There was also a lot at my employer that I could have taken advantage of, that I think companies have a big role in it. And it's a win-win situation to support their working family caregivers that way. So I didn't learn till years later the things that they could have helped us with as far as like finding reputable resources, like, for example, to navigate initially, we were looking for a senior living community for both of my parents, and we were doing that all on our own. And we could have tapped into our employee assistance program and used that. So I think just, I kept a lot of that stuff in, and I think that's a normal thing for caregivers. It's like, oh, I'm just going to figure it out. I'm going to roll up my sleeves and I'm going to solve this, and also feeling like responsible for people's happiness, and we can't be. So it took a long time, I think, to learn how to let go of that and realize that, yes, I have a big role in the care situation, but it can't like suck me in deep where I'm, not feeling like myself, like in burning out and not being of value to all of these other roles and hats that I wear.
Yeah, no, that's so true. I know for myself as well. Never thought or knew the word caregiver, helping with my father's situation. I'm just like, I'm a son, I'm helping my dad, and that's so common and true. But I also like what you said, where employers could do more to help support their employees going through situations. Like, we own a home care company. If we don't understand what caregivers are going through, nobody's going to. So, but other employers, the lost wages, the lost manpower, all of the productivity loss, just offer that support. And I know there's some employers here in Michigan that are starting to recognize that and starting to provide those resources and support services for their employees, which is wonderful. But let's talk about you again for a minute. When you're going through all this and, you're in Georgia, your parents are in Michigan, you have a lot on your plate, right? And anybody that's been a family caregiver understands exactly what we're talking about. How do you find the time? How do you manage the time to still practice your own self-care, making sure you get to that appointment, exercising, not just going through the drive-through because it's quick and easy and you don't have the energy to make a nutritious, healthy meal? What did you do, and what tips could you offer viewers and listeners for self-care?
Is my favorite topic, Lance. So it's like, I think we go through kind of this survival mode for a while, right? And we're living on an adrenaline, and you can do that for a short term type of thing, a knee surgery, a hip replacement, when you can kind of see that things are going to recover. But when you're on a chronic or terminal or a lifelong illness caregiving journey, that is not sustainable. And so kind of coming to terms with that and looking for practical and pragmatic ways was something that it's kind of part of my DNA. So I'm just like, this isn't working. This sucks. Let me figure something out and try something different. And so coming to that realization that I was going to keep getting what I was getting if I kept doing what I was doing, and that wasn't working. So I wasn't going to find the time. I had to create the time. And it was a partnership effort with my husband at the time. So we had kids in middle school. We had conversations about like, okay, this sucks. This isn't working. How are we gonna both survive through this and thrive through this, and our kids, come out okay on the other end too. So it sounds kind of silly, but one of the big things that I did was sit down with a week, 7-day grid calendar and map out how I was currently spending my time. And what, I had work in that, and I had to sleep, and I got to take a shower and go grocery shopping and, all of that. And so it was a little bit of mapping out what a typical week looked like, including the caregiving, and then really assessing it and saying, do I have to keep doing these things? And so one of the things that I was doing that as part of that, an example of what I gave up is my mom lived nearby in an assisted living community. Initially, her needs were way beyond what I could care for as a full-time employee and a mom. And she wanted her stuff, right? Even though they fed her and she had meals there, she wanted her diet ginger ale and her clementines and her tissues and her, poise pads and all of the things that she needed to kind of make her life what she was used to living. And so I was that person, the daughter, and trying to, again, kind of keep her happy and going over and seeing her multiple times a week initially. And not sustainable, right? So then it was a couple conversations talking to my brother, Tim, who I have another brother that lives in Georgia that my brother with a disability lives with, about, hey, can you pick up mom's groceries? I'm gonna go visit her on Wednesday nights. Wednesday night was my night with my mom. Went straight from work. We'd eat dinner together. We'd play a game. I'd do some of the stuff on her to-do list. And I would make the little grocery list and text it to my brother, and then he would pick it up on the weekend and go visit her then. And so it seems so silly, but like setting some boundaries of that, and then looking for ways that then I could repurpose some of this time. Talking to my husband, he's not a morning person. I am a morning person. So getting up a couple mornings, and I found that journaling was really healing for me. So I would schedule some time at Starbucks twice a week in the morning before work. And I would sit there and write on my laptop and just like process it all and have a nice cup of coffee. And I had some regular friends that I, would see there after time. And so that kind of became part of an appointment for myself, frankly. And so doing stuff like that. And then my husband similarly had his time more in the afternoon, where then my role would pick up with the kids. We also would divide and conquer on, they were both in a lot of activities, not a lot, because we were kind of one activity at a time kind of people, parents, but they were in travel sports and they're very demanding. And so we said, okay, you take Jacob and you own travel baseball, like all of that, the communication, the scheduling, all of that. And I'm going to take travel volleyball with Natalie. And it wasn't that we weren't going to go necessarily to the other sports, but we had to kind of divide and conquer of who owned what. And so I have these responsibility worksheets that I work with through clients to, coaching them through this process, that if you are single sourced and the only person that is doing all of the things, that is not sustainable and you will burn out. I have never seen a success story of a solo caregiver. It doesn't work. And so we have to pick the things that we want to continue doing and align those with our strengths and then fill the gaps and find other resources. And we're great at doing this as employees, right? Like we project plan things and we manage to budgets and we find resources for people to fill the gaps on stuff. And it's kind of like that with caregiving, except it's a really, really emotional layer on top of all that too. And you're dealing with people who may not want you to think that they're a project, and they have their own opinions and so forth. But that's it, kind of thinking about it more in a project management role and like a sustainable way, and trying on different things in little micro acts. I think also being cognizant that self-care for prior Elizabeth to caregiving was going to look different than what it was during caregiving. And so I had to get really curious and try on different things and really maximize my time. And so I started finding twofers, like buy one, get one free type of things, where my girlfriends were saying, we never see you anymore. And so again, you have that kind of guilt. And I thought, well, I want to go. I know I get outside helps me. That's good for my mental health. I know I need to move my body, and I want to catch up with my friends. So let's go for a hike. Like, let's go, or let's walk the neighborhood together. And so that was what kind of helped, put this puzzle back together of what that could look like. And it did take intention, a lot of intention.
Yeah, I was going to say intention. You got to be intentional. Thank you for all of that, Elizabeth, and sharing your experiences with our viewers and listeners. Now it's time to go to the other half of Cindy and Christina Hardin-Weiss. Christina.
Thanks. Elizabeth, I really appreciate you being on here. I just think the way, I follow you on Instagram, and you put some stuff out there with your brother and show your caregiving in action. And I just think your brother he seems like a blast to be around.
He's a character.
He is, and he seems like you guys have a blast being around each other.
Usually. Sometimes he tells me I gotta, he thinks I need to lose weight, or he can, you get all sides of it, right? But and I definitely don't film the fighting part of it. No, that's. Hold on a second. Let me grab my camera.
Right.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting that you were caring for your parents. Prior to caring for your parents, your dad was caring for your mom and also your brother. Was there, and now that your parents are gone and your siblings have stepped up, I'm curious, was there ever a time when your dad or your mom talked to you siblings about that care kind of transitioning to you guys for your brother? Was there ever a time where you actually verbally sat down and talked about it?
I don't know that we sat down, but I will say the one thing, my dad was super organized, and he was a really good business person. And I wish he was around to talk through some of the stuff that comes up. But he had the foresight to set up my mom, and they had a trust for their different properties and their things. And they had set up a special needs trust for my brother. So financially, huge peace of mind there. And we knew that my older sister, Susie, was going to be the trustee of Tom's trust. Well, I think initially it was my mom until she passed. And that the three sisters, there's 3 boys, 3 girls in my family. We were going to be the power of attorney, and we were going to be those roles for my parents, all 3 of us, and which is kind of odd. Usually there's, a one decision maker on that. And so there were conversations about that. My folks were snowbirds. They lived half the year in Michigan, half in Florida. And so sometimes it wasn't necessarily a proactive conversation, but it would be too much for my dad, and he would just like boil over and be like, you all are our kids, and we expect you to come when we call you. And we had, mini interventions with them, almost like, they were not healthy individuals, and there were some things that they could have certainly done differently to not put us in a care situation. And so we tried, lots of those kinds of things. We tried getting them to sell their Florida home and move closer to family in Georgia, which they did live here at one point, and they deserted us. We didn't desert them. So, but they were very clear with us that they didn't call it aging in place, but that they were going to do what they wanted to do. And we were their kids, and we were just going to have to figure it out. And so it wasn't necessarily anything like, you're going to be our caregiver, this and that. It was just this underlying expectation that you're going to do whatever it takes. And so we tag teamed a lot, like with my parents when they were sick in Florida. We just, in fact, I have this episode of Happy Healthy Caregiver, just did 200 episodes. So I interview my sisters on the episode, and we talk about this this decade of care and caring for my brother, and just the craziness of all of that. But it's I am grateful that I have them, but there was just an expectation. I wish we had more conversations. There's a little bit of, I think, with that generation, and I'm definitely kind of more of the tough love sister, where I'm going to push the needle. Maybe that's the journalist in me, is like, I'm going to ask the questions. You don't necessarily have to answer the questions, but I'm going to ask them. And sitting down with my dad and my mom, and kind of really trying to get them to see that we were going to be in a crisis situation. And I'd finally gotten my dad to the point where it was too much for him, for my brother and my mom in Florida by themselves. And he was ready to kind of look at living options in Atlanta. But then it was frankly too late. He got sick a couple weeks later.
Wow. Wow. So was it just assumed that with your brother, because you guys all grew up together, and stuff. So did your father, I mean, it sounds like he had everything kind of organized with the trust and stuff, but the care, was it just did he assign one sibling to do it, or did
just the trust
siblings do it, and then you guys figured it out together?
We're still figuring it out, frankly, because here's the thing that, my parents get gold stars for the financial part of it, because could be really a nightmare situation for us right now, frankly. And so we're grateful for that. What they didn't do, and maybe it's because they had 6 kids, maybe it was because, I lived first part of my life and I'm number 5 out of 6 in rural Pennsylvania, and there wasn't access to the resources and things. But my brother has lived a very sheltered, he's sheltered life. He's not hung out with other people who have been living with disabilities like himself. He went through school, the public school system, and was in learning disabled classes. But as an adult, there was times maybe they tried voc rehab and this and that, and then their own health became too much. And so again, backburnered. And so, what Tom's life looked like today is that he spends an inordinate, I can't say that word, amount of time on social media, on YouTube and Facebook. He's got a behavioral, social disability, so that can sometimes get him in trouble. He's going, he drives, which is kind of unusual for people, meeting so many people now like him that don't drive, but that has had his bumps in the roads. Drives with muscle memory, so doesn't use a GPS, but can get himself around pretty well. And he goes to places like normal restaurants and things, but people aren't equipped to how to react to a guy who wears a raccoon hat or a bingo hat. So his mouth gets him in trouble. He has no filter, and he's been kicked out of a lot of different places and get in trouble. So now we're in a situation where we've got to kind of figure out, again, this isn't working. So, how do we get him into the different resources and programs? And it is such a multi-step process to do that. The first step for us was, I found this great nonprofit place in Georgia, Together We Care Georgia, .org or .com, and they are great navigators for this, and have helped me so much. Where do I start? And so step 1 for us is that we needed something on paper that said that he has these disabilities, because we're looking back through the paperwork of stuff, and my parents kept everything. That was another thing. It's well, which is good? Which is the good version of stuff? And we had some things that said that Tom had an intellectual disability, but it was not real professional looking. And so the first step we had to do was pay out of pocket this past year to get extensive testing. And he's 63 years old, has changed a lot over the years. And then, now it's looking at, okay, what resources and programs, what communities are available. Tomorrow we're going to look at a workday program. And I took him for a little tour. Tomorrow he's doing a full day there. But this is brand new for a 63-year-old man to go and sit with people living with disabilities like himself and socializing. And there's a lot of prayer that's okay, please just, think before you speak. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh,
yeah.
That's tough. Yeah. I would think too, Elizabeth, going from, from having an intellectual disability, and now he stepped into the senior
Yeah.
care, the
And he's
senior
autistic.
resources. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so now, do you find that finding those resources, that he's in more in a senior role now because he is senior? Is it
Yeah.
easier to find those resources versus whenever he was younger with an intellectual disability? And does the combination make it even more difficult to find resources?
Sometimes I think, like, I'd say the jury's out on the senior resources. We've been really focused more on the because we just learned at 63 that he's on the autism spectrum. Like, that was new information to us. So he's got this communication and this intellectual thing that combined together. Tom doesn't see age as much as we do. He's probably the intellectual capacity of like a fifth grader. And so when, like, for this day program, for example, he's the oldest person there. The next person down is in their 40s. And so they were maybe a little bit concerned about, he's also the only person that drives. We've been looking at communities potentially where he could live. They've got a massive wait list. We're all kind of curious to see if how that's going to be. Where is he going to thrive in a place where he's living with other people with disabilities and socializing with them? And, we're also on a hunt for like a care buddy. They've got special ones work with people with disabilities where we can give the tasks and the things that we want them to check up on, because that's where we get the most friction with him, is that he doesn't want his little sister bugging him about his meds and, hey, can pull down your compression socks so I can see if you have wounds on your legs, and are you drinking enough water? And it's annoying. So he does better with a third party, particularly a third party woman who can do that role. So, and then I think we want to do is explore more of the senior roles once he has kind of a buddy that can kind of help him navigate some stuff, where, I think he's got a lot of skills that would probably he'd love to be a bingo caller. That would be on his bucket list of being a dream. So we know older adults love to play bingo. Is there a situation where he could be a bingo caller for, a senior community? I hope so.
Yeah, that's awesome. This might seem kind of a silly question, having grown up with your brother and you mentioned being the little sister and asking you some of these kind of questions that a little sister shouldn't or wouldn't ask. Have you noticed, has there been a change in how your relationship is with your brother as you've grown up and you've kind of lived your own separate lives, and now coming back together as a caregiver for him? Has that role changed at all?
Yeah, it certainly has changed. And my brother has changed. Like, he, as a younger person who was, busy with school, and he used to umpire, and he used to work, he used to be employable at a certain time, and they had kind of always said he will get more bitter with age and change as age. And so as he's gotten out of those routines, and my parents had moved him, from these comfort areas, he has gotten more agitated and angry. And so that certainly changes the dynamics of things. We know that we know he does better in small groups. He's much better one-on-one with me, or, in a small family environment than a big family. And most of our family stuff is big because we're a big family. So we have had to kind of, sometimes Tom takes a separate vacation when we do family vacations. He does not want to be around everybody. We're too messy. We are too loud. The sensory things kind of come in. So we have learned and adapted, I think, for ways around that. And, one of the favorite things that he says to my sisters and I is, that we only ever think about ourselves, which I find hilarious, right? No caregiver wants to hear that. Like, right. All you ever think about is yourself. And I'm like, if you only knew all of the things that are happening behind the scenes. But I have noticed, now that Tom is getting more attention, and we are trying to, he is saying some appreciative things. He doesn't always say them. Sometimes I get the sergeant emoji in our text, like, yes, ma'am, sergeant. And then sometimes he'll say, I'm really appreciate what you're doing for me, Elizabeth. So you just never know what you're going to kind of get. You got to kind of be ready for anything.
Yeah, that's a nice little nugget that pops up every once in a while, unexpected, I'm sure.
Yeah.
So tell me this, what do you do now that is helpful for you to keep your well-being moving forward? What are some things that you do for
Uh,
your
Um, a lot of things. I mean, I have to practice what I preach, right? So I'm a self-care coach for other family caregivers. And, initially I was really, really hyper focused on physical self-care, and it made sense because my parents were morbidly obese. They had a lot of health issues that went along with that. And I was scared that I'm going to repeat the same thing. And so exercise, I was like, oh, I'm doing the exercise and then necessarily not feeling energized. And so I have put things through a filter for me is like, is it giving me more physical and emotional energy? Is it giving me peace of mind? Is it joyful? And so putting together things like that is has been a test and learn over the years. And so for one of the things that I do is I try to get outside every single day, like even if it's 15 minutes, walk the dog, listen to a podcast, listen to some music. The mother nature is an energy source for sure. And so I know that about myself. I know that I love my coffee in the morning. I know, sometimes I've gone through spiritual intense periods of time. And then other times, I'm doing different things. I'm focused on strength training right now, building muscle. I know how important that is as we age. I want to always be able to get myself off the floor and do things like that. So, and then socialization is a big part of it. So I do this thing every year this year it's called 20 for 25. And so we do it individually. We do it my family, my sisters, and we all talk about the 20 things that we want to do in 2025 to infuse more joy in our life, because life is hard and life is messy. And so there are different things on there that can be little things. They could be, try a new restaurant or, learn. My daughter has Duolingo on hers. One of mine is to play Mahjong. I've never played that. So tonight I'm hosting a Mahjong learn where I found these two ladies in my town who will come to us. We pay them and they're going to teach us how to play because it's pretty complicated from what I understand. But I'm excited about that. I play pickleball with my husband. A lot of different things. I don't do as much journaling as I did early on in my journey. I miss it. I miss the writing. And so there will be, a season where that will kind of come back, I think, too.
Yeah, and that's okay for that to have seasons to come in seasons. You don't, we have interest and it ebbs and flows through the seasons, like you say, and it's okay to change that. To change that as whatever you need to do to help keep yourself well.
Yeah,
that's the big thing. What would and I'm going to ask you one more question before I throw it back to you, Lance. What would be your advice for a first-time caregiver? Maybe they've recognized that they're caregivers now. So I think from what you were saying earlier, by even just recognizing you're a caregiver, the word caregiver itself kind of opens doors to resources.
Yes.
What would be your advice to a first-time caregiver that has admitted that they are a caregiver? What would be some advice for them?
Yeah, I think, schedule time for yourself, even if it's just a 15-minute, something you can look forward to. And then finding community, I think, is really powerful. And the best thing about caregiving is the community. Frankly, like the people, the peers that I've met, the fellow caregivers, like never met a lousy one yet. They're just really, really awesome people, and you're going to get the best tips and the best advice from that. And particularly in a local level, like you're going to find out about the reputable home care and the the therapists that are available to folks and the support that's out there, because anything that can kind of fast track you to that, it's going to make this more of a sustainable life for you. And then you're going to be able to then repurpose this time and go back to some of the things that you miss doing, and put more of that into your life.
Those are great words of advice, Elizabeth. Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Lance?
All right. Well, thank you, Christina. Elizabeth, we appreciate you taking time out to speak with us today and joining us on the Caregivers Journal. Before we go, I want to ask you one final question. What would be your message of hope for family caregivers? And I'm thinking more particularly to the ones that are just embarking on this journey who, like all of us, have been in that situation where you feel overwhelmed and you don't know which way to turn and what to do. What advice would you offer to them?
Yeah, I mean, there's you're not alone, first of all. Like, we can do hard things, and we are strong people, and you've survived through, 100% of the hard days you've already had, but it's going to be so much easier and so much sustainable if you've kind of surround yourself with a care team and a community of people. And I think too, knowing that it's not all bad, right? Like, I mean, sometimes you feel like there's just days where like, this is a nightmare, but there are a lot of really shiny spots in it. And I think almost, when you're in these traumatic and stressful periods of your life, I almost feel like the joyful moments shine even brighter. It's like finding a diamond in the rough type of thing. So really cherish those. And you're going to feel guilty at times, right? You're going to feel guilty because and guilt's not a bad thing. It just means that you want something else to be true. You want to be showing up for, all the different areas of your life. And so I like to say that when the guilt starts to creep up, because it's always going to creep up, you just give yourself grace and you say, like, I'm doing the best thing that I can do. I'm making the best decisions today with the information I have at this time.
Absolutely. And finally, where would you like people to go to learn more about you?
HappyHealthyCaregiver.com. Check it out and you'll find all the info there.
Wonderful. Christina, give our best to Cindy. Always good to see you.
Can we mention the cruise real quick, y'all?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. We talked about it before we were recording. So yes, please go ahead and plug it.
Yeah, I'm excited that Cindy and Christina and I, along with some other care advocates and influencers, we are going on the Self-Care at Sea cruise in October of 2025. And we want to invite caregivers to come with us because this is a perfect example of like having something to look forward to, which anticipating that is part of the joy. Planning it, talking about it, and getting excited about it. Then you're living it. You get respite while you're there. And then you leave with the community of resources so that when you go back home, you've got this lifeline of support with you. And so we are excited to embark on this kind of new and test and learn about this new Self-Care at Sea journey. And I'm hoping that it's going to be a huge success so that we can keep doing it.
Yes.
You can be as involved as you want, or just sit on a deck chair for the whole cruise, whatever you want. It's your journey, and just know that we'll be there for you. And I know Cindy and I are really looking forward to meeting everybody.
Me too.
It's going to be wonderful. And sadly, I will be there in spirit. I cannot make it because it is my wedding anniversary, but you guys are in good hands with the rest of the people attending. And Elizabeth Miller from Happy Healthy Caregiver, thank you so much. Cindy and Christina, with Christina joining us today. All the best to Cindy. And now it's time for our caregiver tip of the month from Adaptive Equipment Corner.
We had an individual ask us how to adjust a rollator, so that's what we're going to take a look at right now. So, of course, when you're looking at a walker, you always want to adjust the handle height with yourself standing straight up. You want the arms relaxed at your side, and you want the handle to hit you about wrist level, okay? On most rollators, you're going to see some type of an adjustment knob here, and it usually will unscrew just like this, okay? And then, there's this little washer here. Take that off. You pop this pin out, and of course you're going to look over here and see what the adjustment is here. We've got 2 holes showing. So we're going to raise this up, and I'm going to see 2 holes on the inside here. And we're going to put that pin right back in here. If I can get it lined up correctly. And then we'll put this washer back on. And put this right back here. Now, on occasion, you may see an adjustment down here, like a push pin adjustment. Most of the time, that type of an adjustment is actually for the adjustment of the seat height up and down. And it's typically on walkers that are going to be used for a taller individual. Sometimes you can make up the difference in handle height if you need to with that adjustment. But of course, you always have to watch the seat height adjustment as well.
Thank you for joining us again here at the Caregivers Journal podcast, where we're talking with real caregivers about their caregiving journeys. We look forward to seeing you again here next month.